I tried the new Wooting keyboard, so you don't have to. Why so you don't have to? Well, let's just start with I might be a little bit disappointed.
No. Did that just... No. Quick question. Where's the gasket? This plastic garbage. How do I take control? What the hell are you thinking?
Or is it? And you should too. Like, with 30,000 pre-orders, am I about to try the best gaming keyboard ever, or are 30,000 people about to be incredibly disappointed? But to figure that out, I'm trying two different versions of the brand new keyboard. The first being their incredibly luxurious metal case, and the second being a much more budget-friendly plastic option. Wait, what's that?
It's still $200?
You see why I said so you don't have to?
But wait.
This keyboard has revolutionary features like rapid trigger and is used by hundreds of pro players. We'll also be putting that to the test to determine, is it better for just pro players?
Or is this too little, too late?
And so much more.
This video is sponsored by Shopify, but we'll talk about that more later.
First, let's start with what is a Wooting. Well, they're a Dutch manufacturer of keyboards that has massively popularized Hall effect keyboards. This is a really big deal for gaming, but it's also a really big deal if you're anyone else, as it's kind of started a trend of putting magnetic switches in every keyboard. Now, a few years ago, they came out with the Wooting 60HE, which really blew up in the mainstream. Like, you had people saying it was basically cheating, you had people saying it was literally cheating because features of it got banned. We'll talk about that more later. But all you need to know right now is that this keyboard uses magnets and it's kind of cool. And that brings us to earlier this year, where Wooting launched their pre-order for the Wooting 80HE. Within 31 days, they had 23,000 people pre-order this thing. And that was months ago, so I imagine it's way more than that now. And I'll start by looking at the pre-built zinc version, which comes in this really nice carrying case for $289 US. And there's also a cheaper version, which I'll talk about more later. But this carrying case just doesn't feel as good as the strap on the Wooting 60HE.
That doesn't feel as good.
Now, in looking at this keyboard, I want to determine a few different things. Like, number one, is it worth the massive price tag? Number two, will it make you better at gaming? And then, if it is worth all of that, is it worth waiting till
Early November for one?
In the box, you'll find some adjustable feet, a pretty nice braided cable, and a signature Wooting postcard. Greetings from Wooting. Now, if you're brand new to keyboards and you just wanted to figure out if this is a good gaming keyboard, then howdy hey, I'm Hippio-Tech, and I look at keyboards so you don't have to. I have tried hundreds of different keyboards, from Hall effect to mechanical to optical, and this is definitely one of them. So while I'm not a pro gamer by any means, I do know what goes into making a good keyboard, and I am missing the strap from the 60HE.
How am I gonna take control? How do I take control? This is all I have now. They took it away from me.
Well, how about taking control of your online business with my sponsor, Shopify?
And wait, I don't think I could have built this store without Shopify. Shopify is the best commerce platform to build your own business, sell your own desk mats, but please don't, that's like my thing, you know? That's like, okay, chill. Shopify gives you the tools to build your business in one of the easiest ways possible. Like, you just click, no coding, no craziness. Shopify helped me build my store in just a couple hours. But that's not all, because with Shopify Collective, it also empowered me to connect with Kinetic Labs and Pika to sell products all around the world. But you don't care about me, you care about yourself. And that's totally fine. So if you go to shopify.com/Hippio-Tech, then you can also be empowered to start your own business because you'll get a free trial. I really urge you to give this a shot because I never thought I could build my own store until I tried Shopify. Also, shout out to Nola, who's just chilling in the sun right here.
Now, the first thing you'll notice about this keyboard is that the design is decently striking. And the second thing that you'll notice is that it is unbelievably heavy. This case is made out of a zinc alloy, which makes it roughly twice as heavy as an aluminum case of the same density. So despite it looking like the metal is relatively thin, it packs a very heavy punch. Although weight isn't everything, and the case kind of does feel like it's on the cheaper side. I can't really describe why, it just feels off. Like, it kind of reminds me of an electronic that they put weights in to make it feel more heavy, even though it's not actually any more premium. But it's the keyboard equivalent. But they haven't put a weight in it, and there's no fancy back engraving or anything.
So the unboxing experience is pretty nice. It's a nice hard shell case. That's good, right? But the build quality does leave something to be desired here. Sure, you've made it out of metal. That's great, you guys. But like, I can't help but feel some corners were cut here. So where's that premium budget going? Maybe it's the keycaps or the switches, or maybe something on the inside that's just gonna make this thing so much better than every other Hall Effect keyboard that's available now. Because we know there's a lot of those.
And I think what's really important here is comparing with a little bit of context. In the last couple years, a ton of keyboards have come out that have all been around $100, have been full, high-quality aluminum, and featured adornments like fancy weights and knobs and RGB cutout accents. And this case has none of that. Like, it has these silicone feet that you can swap out, which is kind of cool. This lets you adjust the angle, which is kind of nice because it fits a bunch of different desk setups and personal preferences, but they just sit really weird on your keyboard, and it doesn't feel like there's a right way to put them in. But with the thought of keyboards that cost a third of the price feeling more premium, I was a bit confused moving on to the typing experience. And don't worry, I'll talk about gaming soon.
Now, my first impressions typing on this thing, like, this is the best keyboard Wooting has ever made. However, that's really not saying much, because if you know anything about my review of their HE60, it was bad. And is this that much different? Well, that's a bigger rabbit hole, because I think Hall Effect switches might be fundamentally broken, at least from an amazing sound and feel perspective, which we'll get into more later.
And this sound and feel argument will come up a lot, and I know what you're thinking. Hipyo, I'm a gamer. I don't care about the sound and feel of my keyboard. But it's a tool that you're gonna use every day. You're probably gonna use it to write essays or something. There's no reason why it shouldn't be the best possible, especially when there are cheaper options. And especially when the differences for gaming aren't as big as some might have you think. Now, one premium feature for a lot of keyboards is gasket mounting, which makes the typing experience feel soft and bouncy. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not feeling anything here. My desk is flexing more than the keyboard.
Quick question. Where's the gasket? This is not a gasket mount. This is stiffer than something that was stiff. What's going on?
So in order to figure that out, I'll have to open this thing up later, but I am a little bit confused here. Like, did they even add a gasket mount? Now, let me win back the gamers real fast. This thing does have pretty epic RGB. If you're one of those RGB fiends, then this thing does look incredibly nice, albeit it doesn't have fancy side glow, it just has this fancy LED bar. But you know what really isn't epic? The ABS version of this keyboard. Because at first I thought, oh, they made a plastic version. That's gonna be incredibly cheap, affordable, accessible. It's gonna be great that more people can have Rapid Trigger and Wooting. And then I looked at the price and saw they have it at $200. This brings up a big conundrum because the only difference between this and the other one is the zinc case and maybe a carrying case. And while this version might be more lightweight for travel or something like that, it couldn't be a lesser quality feeling plastic, at least to me.
Now, this is genuinely a letdown. Like, you're telling me this is worth $200? No, this just feels like plastic garbage that any other gaming company would put out, and I would be mad at them for that, so I'm gonna get mad at you now. What the hell are you thinking?
And this was the part of the video where I started to get a little bit confused, a little bit sad, and a little bit scared for the 30,000 people that had pre-ordered this thing. Because those switches and software are gonna have to be so good to carry how just disappointingly average everything else about this keyboard is.
Okay, there's me getting mad at you. Now let me be a little bit more measured. The internals are probably the redeeming quality. Well, that brings us to our next point, the switches and the keycaps.
But then while removing a keycap, I ran into yet another issue.
No. Did that just... It did not just...
The paint finish on the white zinc case picks up scratches like I pick up random hobbies, but not in a healthy self-care kind of way.
Wait, my case is now ruined. Like, just look at this.
Now, a magic eraser does a lot of work on these scratches, but that left me wondering, like,
what's the point of having a metal case if it's gonna scratch that easily? Literally, even bumping my mouse into this thing can leave a scratch on the case. I can't imagine what this thing will look like in a year or two of average gamer usage. You know what I mean?
Now, I guess for some people, this could be considered like a feature, like your Wooting keyboard will age like fine wine or something like that. And I talked to the CEO of Wooting about this, and he told me it's related to the paint that they use, so if you don't want your case to scratch, maybe get a black version of the zinc case.
But that's great! great because Wooting offers something different, a module and case that I'll be looking at later in this video. Because maybe the best way to use this keyboard is to not buy it as a kit from Wooting. This could be cool.
Now, if you do buy it as a kit, you get these double shot PBT keycaps included, which are the standard shine through gamer keycaps that you're used to on most other gamer keyboards. They're fine, they'll feel comfortable if that's what you're used to, but they definitely aren't high quality or anything. And replacement sets are 30 bucks, which is just a little bit silly. But these switches is where this board sets itself apart. These are the Lecker V2 switches. They are Hall effect, meaning magnetic switches. The board is hot swappable, meaning you can swap in any other magnetic switch, not your standard mechanical switches. And I'll talk about some of the alternatives later, but in the first Wooting 60HE, I absolutely hated the switches. They felt pretty scratchy. You had to hand lube them to get them even sounding slightly decent, and no matter what you did, they were still very chattery and annoying.
Now, the Lecker V2 comes in two options. You have a lighter weight version and a heavier version, but it still has that hallmark Hall effect chatter. What's going on? This is V2? Really? They are marginally more smooth. They have slightly less stem wobble. They're a tiny bit thockier, but it still has the fundamental design flaw with every single magnetic switch. It sounds unbelievably chattery, especially when you start to compare them to other mechanical switches that have come out in the last year.
Now, if you're brand new to keyboards and you don't really know what I'm talking about, keyboards have the capacity to sound absolutely incredible, whether you like a deep sound profile or a bright sound profile. And let me just give you an example of a keyboard that costs around $100. Yeah, that's a third of this price.
But I know what you're thinking. Hipyo, they're not other switches. They're magnetic. They're Hall effect. Well, let's talk about Hall effect just a little bit. Let's get into a little bit of a Hall effect rant.
Now, if you've been in any gaming circle for the last couple years, you've probably heard about Hall effect or rapid trigger. There's a bunch of umbrella terms, but essentially what it means is you're moving your input from a mechanical one to an analog one. In the case of Hall effect, you're using magnets and fancy sensors, and all of the technology is incredibly cool. At a blanket level, it gives you control over how your switches actuate, meaning you could set the point at a variable level for each individual switch. And this does have some really cool uses, but overall, it's generally a bit niche. Some uses where it is incredibly overpowered is games like Osu, where you can basically spam at a way faster rate. There's also slight advantages in games like Valorant, where you can stop your movement a little bit quicker. Or Apex Legends, where it reduces the margin of error for slide jumping by quite a bit. And in general, using a rapid trigger keyboard will give you a few seconds more of latency reduction just in your personal human latency. This is all incredibly cool, but it's been heavily over-sensationalized, saying that it's basically cheating and giving a lot of gamers a massive sense of FOMO, like if they don't have this keyboard, they'll never be able to compete. Now, none of this is Wooting's fault, as they've actually been incredibly tame with their marketing and advertising. And I actually had a really good 2-hour chat with the CEO, Calder. If you guys are interested, I'll post the full 2-hour unedited VOD of our conversation for my YouTube members, which you can hit with the join button down below.
I mean, objectively, rapid trigger makes a big difference. Like, there's a lot of things that I'll be like, like the 8K polling versus 1K polling, really, like, objectively,
There's
no
difference.
matter.
There's no difference. There's no difference. Now, all of this sounds really great, right? Like, Hall effect is a really cool technology that does make you marginally better in a game.
But there's just one problem, and it's that the main advantage for Hall effect keyboards in gaming, the main reason why it was basically necessary to get one of these was SOCD, Snappy Tappy, Snap Tap, whatever you want to call it. And I made a video on that and how it's starting to get banned in almost every competitive game.
However, from my perspective, it's still incredibly new and it locks you into a really tight ecosystem. Even worse than that, if you're buying it to become a better gamer, then please don't. I can guarantee you with 100% certainty, if you spent the same amount of money that you would on the Wooting, on professional coaching for the game that you enjoy the most, the amount of improvement that you will see will be leagues ahead of a hardware upgrade. Like, from my personal experience, I spent $150 on League of Legends coaching and went from gold all the way up to Emerald 1. Those are meaningful differences in gameplay that hardware can help with when you're at the very top, but not when you're at the bottom. Now, there's still a ton of things I want to look at with this keyboard, and I'm still going to be building a basically fully custom version of it, so stick around for that. But my main thesis with Hall Effect is, yes, it is technically the best Switch for gaming. But that doesn't mean that it's the only Switch for gaming. It might be one of the best options for pro players, but that's because they're basically already at the top. But let's say you had your mind set on a Hall Effect keyboard, and that is the one thing that you want. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, there has been a ton of different Hall Effect keyboard options that all use essentially the same switch and essentially the same rapid trigger technology. And a lot of those are more affordable, albeit potentially more unreliable because of their software.
Now, here's something that they do incredibly well. It's software and the fact that it just works. There's no crazy, really sketchy software that you probably think is malware. The fact that it's just intuitive to use, you just go bing bong, change your actuation point. It works every time. I wasn't scratching my head having an intense headache like I do with some other softwares. Wooting leads the pack in software, and that could be one of their main advantages here if that's something that you really care about.
Now, to their credit, it can't be understated how good their software support is, and even their 4-year warranty is way above some of their competition. Wooting has been known to push software updates for keyboards that are 7 years old, so that is a level of reliability that is kind of, essentially what you're paying for here, with albeit lackluster build quality.
So while the software is incredibly helpful for helping you dial in variable actuation points and taking advantage of rapid trigger in specific games where it gives you a true advantage like Osu, other things are a bit more of a gimmick or won't actually help you because they're gonna get banned. But what if you want something more? What if you want customization? Let's build our own. This is the Wooting module, and this is the Wooting case. This is probably my favorite part of the whole 80HE launch, and it's that they sell everything modular so that you can build it yourself and make it your own. In fact, I would wager to say it's really not worth buying the full pre-built 80HE because of how much more freedom this gives you.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Hipyo, it's not worth buying the pre-built version? Isn't this like the whole thing with keyboards nowadays is the pre-built is better? And while yes, this is technically true for most keyboards, what we just established is that what Wooting is best at is software. So essentially, you just really want their plate and PCB here. Now, looking at this plate and PCB, we can kind of see why the gasket performance was so lackluster earlier in this video. Like, it's just kind of those really stiff gasket blocks, which are nice, but leave a lot to be desired. Now, to buy all these modules separately, you kind of do have to shell out a pretty penny regardless, as the PCB and plate assembly is $155 US, the zinc alloy case is $110 US, and the ABS plastic one is $35. But this does allow you to bring in your own switches and customize the keyboard to your liking, because the WS Dash switches I still think are just arguably a little bit better. But as I mentioned before, there really aren't that many Hall Effect switches that are actually great. And yeah, I tried the Gateron Jades. They're right there in my hand. For those of you that don't know, Gateron Jades are technically the most popular Hall Effect switch. I think Dashes are a recolor of them, but for some reason the Jades were just worse. I don't know. But either way, I did like the performance of these more than the Wooting Lekker V2s. Although I did have a friend try them and she thought the exact opposite. And that really illustrates where keyboards as a hobby comes down to entirely preference, as any of these switches could be your preferred switch. In fact, there's probably some weird crazy person out there that prefers a Hall Effect switch to a mechanical switch. Now, one really cool thing is that similar to the 60HE, they plan to make this pretty open source so that other people can make their own cases for it. And I think once that's available, then this will really shine, because you could just buy the 80HE module, get a different case, get different keycaps and switches, and maybe Hall Effect switches will be better by then. And you could have a really satisfying keyboard build if you're someone that prefers Hall Effect stuff. Now, if you buy the pre-built version, you can always swap out the keycaps and switches later, but buying it as a module like this just means you have the control from the start. Like, I'm gonna put GMK Botanical on here because I like houseplants. And yes, I know the absurdity of putting a $100 keycap set on a keyboard that I just complained was too expensive. I don't make rational decisions. And also, there is two sides to the keyboard hobby, like a very expensive luxury side that doesn't care about spending money on things as long as they're super nice, and then a super hyper optimized budget side. Both are valid, but I just have issue when things are really expensive, but not the high quality. Now, earlier I mentioned it's probably not worth buying the ABS version of this board, but if you did buy the ABS version of this, then you could theoretically just swap out the case later. But I would just simmer on that one for a little bit, you know?
So I tried 2 different versions of the Wooting ADHE, a more upgraded, fancy custom version, and a very basic ABS version. Well, ultimately, the ABS version, I would say, is just genuinely not worth it unless you know you need Hall Effect and you know you want Wooting software. It feels like a really cheap experience. It's not very satisfying to type on. I was overall just genuinely really let down. And then for the metal version, you've got an inferior metal keyboard experience, although it at least feels a little bit better to type on. It's a little bit more premium. It feels slightly more worth it to me. But all of this comes down to software and Hall Effect technology, because these are just worse keyboards than what you can get nowadays, unless you care about Hall Effect. Okay, let me give you an example, like the Boog 75, some other random keyboards that I've tried but can't think of at the moment. There's a lot of options out there. Wooting is one of them, but is now not the only option.
VoiceOver Hippio here, and I do remember some examples, like the ACO Monsgeek M1 V3. $200 cheaper, has Hall Effect switches, they feel and sound very similar. There's the Boog 75, which has an amazing build quality and a similar sound and feel. But that's $80 cheaper. So here's the thing. As I expected, the Wooting keyboards are relatively mid, but at a decently premium price point. This means that you're paying the extra money for what is arguably way better software, way better warranty support, reliability, brand name recognition, and some of that other stuff.
And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, Hippio, you're just a keyboard enthusiast and you're stuck up and you're not the target demographic for this gaming keyboard. Well, dude, I have thousands of hours in CSGO, Valorant, League of Legends, Minecraft, you name it, I've played a lot of it. Do I look like the kind of person that goes outside that often? Well, I do sometimes because I'm a bit of a healthy gamer. But I am the target demographic for this keyboard. I am a gamer with a disposable income, and I just don't think it's worth it for most people. And I'll say what I've said about almost every Hall Effect keyboard recently. It's just not ready for that. Like, this is Wooting's best keyboard, but Wooting's mission is to make Hall Effect the next standard switch for keyboards. And I still think that has a long way to go, but keep working on it. It is exciting. It is exciting. It's just not for everyone.